Hi, and welcome to Answers News for Monday, June the 10th, 2019. I'm here with Dr. Georgia Purdom and Bodie Hodge.
Nice to see you, Avery.
It's nice. I'm back from Canada finally, so I'm back to be on the show again, which is nice. We have a wonderful studio audience. You guys want to clap and say hi?
Let's hear you. There they are.
All right.
Enthusiastic crowd today.
Yeah, we do. So we're going to talk about a couple of things before we get started here with our articles, and that is our high school lab. So I know everyone's out for the summer and enjoying not having school maybe right now, but fall is right around the corner. I'm a homeschool mom.
No, don't say that. Don't say that.
No,
I'm a homeschool mom, which means I
like
plan all summer. So I'm planning for the fall, and we have high school labs that we now offer here at the Creation Museum. It's 12 sessions comprised of 4 hours each session. So they get 24 basically labs total, 48 hours. So it really is a lot of great instruction by experts in the field. And this next year, we offered biology this past school year, but this coming school year, we'll offer biology, chemistry, physics, and forensic science. And so
super
great
cool.
opportunity. And we have people come from, last year I think we had someone come from 5 hours away. So they would drive in, do the lab sessions, and then go home. So it's a great opportunity. But in the month of June, we have a special promotion. You can get 15% off the total cost of the lab and a free pass for the parent to explore the Creation Museum that day. So you'll want to take advantage of that. It's only good until June 30th. So you can go online and register for those, and we'll put a link there and you can see that. But
And there's a limited number of spots in each one.
Right, there's
so
only
if you
30
want
spots available in each lab. Yeah,
get it now.
So you'll want to sign up. My daughter did biology this last year and really enjoyed it. So, and she's not much of a science person, so that speaks to it. So
Well, I'm seeing people hop on here from all over the U.S., but I'm also seeing Sweden, Wales,
New Zealand,
and U.S.
Here.
Embassy in Kabul.
Oh, wow.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah.
That's neat.
Wow, that
Slovakia.
is really neat. So
Yep.
yeah, I found I got Malaysia. So
All right. Come on, I need more people on mine. I got New Zealand.
all right.
But before
That's
we
all
get
you
started,
need.
though, I do have to mention that today is a special day because it's my brother's birthday. So happy birthday, Ethan. And today is my sister's wedding day. So,
there you go.
which it might be
She's
confusing why
working
I'm
on her
here.
sister's wedding day.
I'm very dedicated to Answers News. No, my sister had like a really small wedding. She's kind of like an elopement. So, but my now brother-in-law in an hour watches every single episode of Answers News.
Oh, wow.
He never misses it. So we'll see if he misses it today or not.
He might have a legitimate
Are you watching,
excuse.
Mark?
We gotta
I don't
get
know.
this
He might
service
miss
done
it.
in time so we can watch
He
the
might
news.
miss it because he gets married in an hour, but we'll see. But congratulations, you guys. We're super happy. So.
All right, so we
All right,
also
now we can
have a
get started.
conference coming up called One Race, One Blood, Biblical and Scientific Answers. And this is an answers conference that's being held in October of this year. And we're going to be speaking about this topic that is very, very relevant in our culture today. With Ken Ham and Bodie Bauckham and Charles Ware and Johnny Hunt. And then Bodie and I are
I'll be
speaking
there,
at
yeah.
it, as well as Terry Morton. I think Dr. Terry Mortensen's speaking at it as well.
I'll be talking about where different people groups come from, like where the
Yeah.
Chinese or the English or the Germans come
Right.
from, things like that. So
That's your topic?
Yeah.
So it's going to be at the Ark Encounter at our brand new Answer Center there. So you want to check that out, October 8th through the 10th. It's not just for pastors and Christian leaders. It really is for everybody. And so we encourage you to come out and join us for that. Early bird pricing ends June 30th. So if you want to take advantage of the best price, register today. All right. Let's see. We're on to our first story then.
All right.
Our first fluff story.
Our first fluff story.
Yeah.
What looks like a massive storm system on National Weather Service radar is actually a lot of ladybugs. So apparently in San Diego County, there was on the National Weather Service's radar that looked like this really weird system coming in. This
They thought
very
it
big
was rain.
system.
Yeah.
And it turns out it wasn't a weather system at all. It was just a bunch of ladybugs.
Yeah.
A lot of ladybugs.
I wonder
they
if
don't-
stuff like this bugs the Weather Service.
There's one pun today, people. All right. He's our pun master over here. So they hibernate. So ladybugs do hibernate in California in clusters typically to help them stay warm and everything, and then they migrate west in the spring. But this is unusual to see this number of them moving at the same time. It was measured at being 80 miles by 80 miles. So this is a lot of ladybugs.
Yeah, some as high as 5,000 to 9,000 feet high. So you can
Who
see
knew
why it's tripping
ladybugs flew that
radars. Yeah.
high?
I had no idea. And they said it didn't look like a dense cloud of them from the ground. It just looked like all these little specks up in the
Yeah.
sky. But it was ladybugs, and it showed up on the radar as this big weather
I
system.
used to have them when I lived up in more northern Ohio. Ladybugs were constant. It just seemed like, especially in the summer, I literally take the vacuum cleaner and suck them up. Some people were shaking their heads. They know I'm here. I get stink bugs instead of ladybugs. I don't know which is worse. But,
I don't know.
Yeah, every 17 years we deal with the locust, right?
yeah.
So.
We lived in an old farmhouse growing up, and I remember sucking up all the house flies with the vacuum because they'd just be on the windows, and it was so
Bugs
gross.
everywhere. So. I've got people in here from Australia, Nova Scotia. Boy, it's really international today.
It is,
So that's
wow.
pretty cool.
Holland.
All right, good.
Yeah.
All right, next.
Here's a happy one. We don't usually get to
Yes,
discuss
this
some
is
happy
good.
news, so we thought we'd do some good news. Amid a sea of companies raising money for abortion, Wendy's stands up and promotes adoption, which is really good to see. So they have this program called Wendy's Wonderful Kids, where they help children who are considered more difficult to place, like older children or sibling groups or those with special needs, and help them find loving families, which is awesome. And it's great to see a company supporting something that's great.
Yeah, Dave Thomas, the founder of Wendy's, he was actually adopted himself and set up the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption, which has been operating for a lot of years now.
Yeah.
And, you know, it's really nice to see that. And
we hear so much about abortion and all of that.
And all these different companies that are supporting abortion or whatever.
And so it's good to see one that supports and promotes adoption. My husband and I, we adopted our daughter from China. Brian, who's on here sometimes, they have adopted 2 children here domestically. And so, everyone has a heart for that, whether they do it or not. Every Christian should.
Yeah.
And I love what they say here. They talk about, at the core is knowing that child. When you give a caseworker time to really work a case, you will find an adoptive family for these children. And that's because no child is an accident, right? Every child is made by God, fearfully and wonderfully made. And there is a family for every child. And so I hope that people that, are considering abortion and all of that realize there are so many families out there that would love to have your child and take care of that child and welcome them into their family. And so just to know that that is a very viable option for them and hope that they will follow that. So, go Wendy's on that.
Yeah.
kudos.
Okay.
All right, getting into our actual news here. Curious kids. Are humans going to evolve again? So this is a column on a website called The Conversation called Curious Kids, and they answer a bunch of different questions from kids. So this kid emailed them and said, are humans going to evolve again? And then they have this associate professor from Australia who answers the question with basically saying, yeah, humans are evolving right now. You just might not notice it because it's so small. It's not like the big changes we've seen in the past, like the arrival of mammals or humans learning to walk upright. It's these small changes like lactose intolerance.
Right.
That we see today.
All that terrible stuff that's going backwards.
Yeah, exactly.
Yes. So that's how humans evolving today.
Well, they try to explain the differences between what they are terming as macroevolution and microevolution. So they say, well, macroevolution is like the big scale changes, and they say, like you see in the fossil record. We don't see animals changing in the fossil record. That is an interpretation of the
those
fossil
bones
record.
are pretty much still bones.
Yeah, they're still bones. They're not actually evolving or changing or whatever. That's an interpretation that they put on it based on their ideas about the past. And so what we really see is just different animals.
Well, let's talk a little bit more about that micro versus macro evolution, because I think people get confused at that terminology because they both use the term evolution. Macro evolution is what people think of when you hear evolution.
Molecules
like
to man.
molecules to man, an amoeba changing into a dog over long periods of time. Microevolution actually isn't evolution.
No.
It encompasses things like natural selection or mutations, the things that we observe on a smaller scale.
Variation.
Within a kind,
Right, variations, that sort of thing. And those little things, we see those types of things happen. And for example, dogs getting longer hair versus shorter hair, but you're not seeing dogs change into cows. Those are the types of changes we're talking about when they say micro. I actually don't like to use the term microevolution.
We don't, because the problem is that people will say, well, if you give micro, what the evolutionists will say is, well, microevolution over big spans of time leads to macroevolution. But that's just not, that's why we don't use those terms, because it's just not appropriate. Microevolution will never lead to those kinds of changes. It does. It's not the types of changes that you need. It just leads to variation or speciation.
Right, microevolution is not evolution.
Right.
Not at all.
Right.
They even mention in this article, they talk about, well, this evolution happens because of the way genes shuffle. Well, that doesn't explain where the information is coming from. That's just, you can't shuffle information around and get a new kind of organism. That's
Maybe we
not
should start
how it
calling
works.
that stuff microcreation. Because it's just variation within the created kind.
Well, and they talk about how, changes in the gene pool have happened. So maybe a certain population becomes lactose intolerant, for example, or a certain population is able to digest starch better. Okay, but that doesn't explain the origin of the genes
Where did
that
that
led
stuff
to them
come from?
Not at
doing
all,
any
yeah.
of those things.
Right.
So I always say they never explain the origin of, right? They just want to explain the variation within, basically.
Yeah, and that's actually a bait and switch. They're using that term evolution, microevolution to jump to macroevolution.
Right.
Because they say, hey, with micro, we can observe these little bitty changes, but now all of a sudden they're going to jump and say, well, macroevolution, therefore, but you can't observe or repeat that.
Right.
So that's
Really,
the difference.
what they're observing here is consistent with a biblical worldview because we can explain where the information came from. We don't have to try and invent a way for new information to come about because God created that genetic diversity at the very beginning, and we're just seeing variations of the genetic diversity God already created. So it fits with a biblical worldview and doesn't with an evolutionary
Hey,
worldview.
in this particular article, they were saying that two-footed apes or hominins basically started out about 8 million years ago in this article. What's interesting is last week we had an article that said because stars blow up about 2 to 3 million years ago, that's when we started walking upright. It goes to show that even in the evolutionary literature, they can't even get
They
all
can't
over
even
the
be
place,
consistent.
yeah.
Yeah. Somebody on here asked the question, they said, if evolution happened in the past from apes to humans, and we still have apes and humans, wouldn't we see all the in-between now too? And the answer to that is no, because they would say, well, this occurred over millions of years, and so there was a common ancestor with the apes and the humans, and there was a split off about it depends on what article you're reading, but usually about 6 million years ago, they would say, or somewhere between 3 and 6 million years ago, you had a line that came off that became human and a line that came off that became the chimps that we have today. So that explains why we don't see they would never say we would see all the in-between because of that.
Right, in their worldview, yeah.
But this is very deceptive to kids, is my
Very,
big thing. Because they're going to
yes.
say, so they say, so as you can see, human evolution hasn't really stopped. But they're equivocating, okay? They're equivocating the idea of molecules to man with this variation and adaptation, and that's a problem.
Yeah, but I want you to notice something. The kid that asked this question, his name is Timmy from London, and he is 10 years old. So he has already been very well indoctrinated into an evolutionary worldview to understand that aspect so well to ask this question.
Yeah. And the answer is no, humans are not going to evolve again because they didn't evolve in the past.
Yeah, they didn't
So,
evolve
much
in
shorter
the first place.
answer.
They were created by God
To the question.
on day 6.
Somebody on here says, of course, one of Avery's siblings is having a birthday. Every day is somebody's birthday among Avery's 63 siblings. She doesn't have 63 siblings. How many
It
do you
feels
have?
like it,
Only
though.
14 siblings.
Only 14 siblings, so not 63.
But June is our birthday month. Like my brother Amos's birthday's on the 3rd, then my dad's is on the 6th, then Ethan's is on the 10th, and then Jillian's is on the 19th.
Oh my
so
goodness.
June is our
I
busy
can't even
month.
keep up.
And
Well,
now we have an anniversary
when
on
you have
June 10th
14
as well.
kids,
so.
one month is
well,
bound
there's
to get
15.
stacked,
There's
right?
15 kids, just 14 siblings. So there's 15 of us in
gotcha.
total.
Yeah.
So you can't forget about me.
All right.
Who are you?
My 63 siblings, that's hilarious. All right, libraries are becoming private child corruption centers. So we've talked multiple times on this show about drag queen story hours that are happening in libraries all across the US. And a lot of times people will comment and be like, oh, that's not happening in my state. Well, this happened in Ohio. It's happening in your state. Like,
happening all around.
don't be deceived. This is happening all over the place. This article was talking about in Delaware County, Ohio, which is a suburb north of Columbus. They had the library on their teen page advertised a session called Drag 101. And here's how they describe it on their website. Drag 101 teen program. Curious about the art of drag and no idea where to start? Come learn the basics from former Miss Gay Ohio America, Selena T. West. All genders welcome. Drag is for everyone. Teens only, please. So your teens can go to the library and learn all about how to do drag. No parents. No parents can come.
We don't want any parents hearing what we're talking to your kids about. What's interesting in here was talking about the drag queen story hours and that sort of thing. They said, and I'm quoting the article here, and then those guys turn out to be convicted child molesters that happened in Houston.
In
for
Houston,
example.
yeah, they found out some of the people who were coming were
I mean,
pedophiles.
they're trying to get parents to go drop their kids off privately to let them teach them whatever they want without you parents knowing about it.
And the thing is, so there was an outcry about this. Thank goodness parents saw it and said something about it, right? That's what we've got to start doing. You can't be silent on this stuff. Even if your kid would never intend to go to a program like that, what about all the other kids who parents maybe not as vigilant or whatever, or who innocently
some
drop
at the
them
library?
off?
Yeah, go ahead.
That happens. So they now will allow one parent to accompany each teen going to the program. So that's good. But they say the reason they didn't want parents there is because they wanted the kids to have a safe space. So a safe space away from their parents. That's the safe
That's where you're
space.
safe.
In
away
other
from your
words, they're
parents.
saying that
Like,
kids with their parents aren't safe.
Yeah.
But they're
That's-
safe with some of these people who are quite questionable.
this is part of their summer reading program. Like,
Hey.
there's some wholesome summer reading.
Do you
So
think the
disturbing.
library
Drag
would
queen.
turn this around and say, hey, we're going to have creation hour, send your
Yeah.
kids, but no parents allowed?
Yeah.
Do you think evolutionary parents would go nuts over something like that?
Of course they would.
Of course
Well,
they
or
would.
if they tried to have an hour where they talked about the problems with homosexuality and the transgender ideas, and can you imagine? There would be a huge outcry. They would never allow, the library in the first place wouldn't even
Wouldn't
allow
allow
such
it,
a
yeah.
program to take place. So
Yeah.
it's totally inconsistent that they're spending taxpayer money for this, but then most likely not allowing a
Yeah.
program that said the
Yeah.
opposite to come in.
And the drag queen who is coming, the author of this article said that if you look up this person, there are sexually suggestive images of this person all over the internet.
Yep.
So these teens come, they listen to this person, what are they going to do? They're going to Google him.
Yep.
And that's what they're going to see. And they brought up a really interesting point in this article that if you don't have any parents there, who's to say this drag queen isn't collecting cell phone numbers and
Right.
texting these kids? Like, there's no supervision, there's no oversight whatsoever. Like, it's a really dangerous situation. So at least now they're allowing one parent to come, but they won't cancel the program.
And that was only because of the outcry.
That's only because parents were like, wait a second, you can't do that.
Somebody on here said, and this is why it's so important. I mean, we see things like this, and it's so sad, and yet this is why we need to equip our kids, right? Because they're going to be exposed to this stuff at some point, no matter how much you try to shelter them. And somebody on here said, the other day, my 8-year-old found a 30,000-year comment in a faith-based book, must have been about how old something was or something, and she said to me, Mom, this is wrong. This isn't a Christian book. She could have only pointed that out by reading tons of Ken Ham's material for children.
Yeah.
And so that's good. You got to teach them to be discerning because you're not going to be able to protect them from all of this. You
Yeah,
gotta
for
teach
sure.
them how to think and teach them how to know that stuff.
Hey, one of the comments that I saw in here with regards to this library situation is, hey, that's our tax dollars that's paying for that
Yeah,
stuff.
it is.
Keep that in
Yep.
mind.
That's a terrible use of tax dollars.
Yeah, it's sad but true. Okay.
All right, this next one comes from the New York Times. Scientists created bacteria with a synthetic genome. Is this artificial life? So they're saying this is a milestone for synthetic biology because they've made an entirely man-made, perhaps new form of life. Now, you're a geneticist.
Yep.
What do you think
did they
about
really
this?
do
Did
that?
they
Did they really make it from
invent a new
scratch?
form of life entirely man-made?
Well, they're still calling it E. coli, so it's not new. E. coli has been around since creation, so it's not new in that sense. So basically, what they did was they just took the current genome of E. coli, which is which is a little over 1 million bases long, and they sort of and they copied it and tweaked it and changed it a little bit, and then expanded it. So, but it's still making things that it's.
So they copy edited it.
Yeah, pretty much copy and paste
Really
it.
what they did, yeah.
And one of the big things that they did in this was, so when I'm trying to think an easy and quick way to explain this.
Yeah.
So
Getting
genetics isn't
sciencey
always
here.
easy.
Geneticist.
So we make proteins, okay? Our body makes proteins. And the message, the code in our DNA to do that is what they call redundant, okay? So we have 20 amino acids that make up our proteins, okay, in different, forms. But we have 64 codons, okay, that code for those 20 amino acids. So they say it's redundant. In other words, there's more than one codon for every amino acid. So they said, now, again, they're saying it's redundant, but how do they really know that, right? They're just saying that.
They're assuming from an evolutionary worldview there should be.
It's like
redundancies
vestigial
and things,
organs,
yeah.
we needed that, 1 million years ago, but we don't need it anymore. It doesn't do anything. And then they find out it really does. Well, the author of this, Carl Zimmer, who's a well-known evolutionist, apparently is just not up on the literature on this because we know that these are not redundancies. We know that the reason that a lot of these amino acids have multiple codons is because they are doing something. Those codons, it's actually important. They're fine-tuning the regulation of the production of these proteins. And so they are, in fact, important and they are doing something. The literature shows that over and over again. So to say it's redundant is just ignorance of the
Okay,
literature.
so let me get this straight. They basically took E. coli, copied its genome, added it to it, made a few editorial changes,
Yeah.
and then said, okay, let's see what we got.
Yeah.
So basically just copied what was already there, messed
Yeah.
it up. Hey, did it make it work better or worse?
Well, it doesn't look like it's better because the E. coli are a weird shape and they're taking a lot longer to reproduce. Well, they've got 4 million bases now instead of 1 million, so that's
So that
probably
makes sense.
why.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So basically
Yeah.
they took it, made it worse, and said, look, we did a great job.
Yeah.
And the study leader wanted to find, the person who led the study wanted to find out why all living things encode genetic information in the same baffling way. Well, it's because they have a common designer. God created.
Yeah, I don't understand. And even from an evolutionary standpoint, since one organism evolved from the other, why wouldn't you expect it to encode the information the same way? That comment didn't even make any sense to me. I don't know.
But they're hoping this will tell them more about how the genetic code arose in early life.
Do you realize how much intelligence and technology was involved?
Really expensive technology. They're talking at the end about how expensive
it was.
it was.
You don't just shove 4 million bases into E. coli, okay? You just don't pop it in there. They had to do it piece by piece, literally.
Really
Literally do it piece by piece. So this took a lot of intelligence, a lot of time. Now, it may have some good biomedical outcomes because bacteria can produce these proteins and maybe some unusual proteins or some things that we're not used to seeing. So that's cool. It might have some good biomedical uses, but it's not artificial life. It's not synthetic life. It's just copying of life that was already there.
So the title is a little overblown.
A little bit misleading.
It is the media, so. Okay, this is so cool. Somebody said, thank you for your time and space here. One of the homework for an English, so the English isn't perfect here, but one of the homeworks for an English class in Costa Rica is that the students need to watch the program and we comment on this in class. So they have to watch a program in English. And so, this person is watching this show and then they have to teach it in their class. And so he said that's a great way to, incorporate some scriptural, things into his class. I thought that was really, really neat. So.
That's really neat. We love hearing how people are using the program and stuff. Someone here said they just got home from the Incredible Race. The kids love the VBS program.
Great.
So that's our
I had
VBS.
a comment on that too.
That's awesome. That's the time of year.
Yeah.
That's great. All right. Life on Pluto. Ocean long thought to be frozen could be hidden, study claims. So of course, all you need to form life is water. We all know that, right? All you need is water, nothing else. Just as long as you have liquid water, you can get life. And that's what they think is happening on Pluto, because this ocean that they thought would be frozen through, because it should be in the evolutionary time scale, it should be long frozen through, it's not frozen through. So they're like, well, there must be an insulating layer of gas in between the ice on the top and the water that protects the water, that's kept it from freezing. There's no observational evidence from what we could see for that. It just has to be there because in an evolutionary worldview, this ocean should be frozen solid within a million years.
Basically, their expectations were totally not met. They're expecting to go out there and see Pluto in a certain way, and it was totally wrong from what they expected.
Not meet the evolutionary expectations at all.
The team believed the ocean should have frozen over millions of years ago, but the land formations show that the images contradict what was previously thought about the surface.
Bingo.
Yep. But you know what? If Pluto was created on day 6, a matter of thousands of years ago, this makes sense. We expect to see this.
They didn't think it would be geologically active. Like this planet should be, well, it's not a planet anymore, but
back in my day, it was a planet. When Ken Ham was younger, it was a planet.
When I was younger, it was a planet.
When I was younger, I believe it was a planet.
Did you guys know
I learned
that
it was a planet.
Ceres, which is the biggest asteroid in the asteroid belt between Mars and Jupiter, that actually used to be considered a planet from 1801 to about the 1850s. So back when Abraham Lincoln was alive, Ceres was a planet. So anytime someone looks like Abraham Lincoln or Ken Ham, a planet gets demoted, I guess.
Oh, gosh.
I don't know.
It's interesting. Somebody said on here in reference to the previous article, they said bacteria is life, but an unborn baby isn't. They actually call that life, like bacterial life, artificial life, but not a baby.
And actually, they're getting to a point now where if you just see some water somewhere, they just think life.
Well, that's
There's water.
Too.
Must be life, because that's all you need. It's not complex at all.
Okay.
All right. Thomas McDaniels. Churches should learn from Blockbuster. Change with the times or die. So does anyone even remember Blockbuster?
I went to
There's
many.
a few
remember
people.
as a really young child, we used to go to Blockbuster and get like VHSs, but that was a long time ago.
VHS for the younger generation are what, MP4s or
I still remember
movie
that.
files used to be, Blu-ray, think of that.
So this article is talking about how church attendance is really down. Back 30 years ago, 67% of Americans attended and supported a local church. That's down to 37%, and it continues to decline. So he's basically saying, just like Blockbuster, Kodak, some of the really famous companies of the past that are gone now, churches need to start changing or they're just going to die out.
Yeah.
But he doesn't really give a practical way for that to happen.
Well-
Like he says, churches can't just be cool. Being cool isn't good enough, but that's kind of where he stops.
Well, and I think he says the primary reason that they're not, attending church is that the church has become mostly irrelevant. I agree. And the reason it's become irrelevant is because we're not giving answers to the question that people are asking. We're not teaching how to view the world in a biblical worldview. Instead, we just have cool music and fog machines and coffee and think that that's okay, that that's going to help people. That's
Right, we're not
really
talking about the authority of Scripture in all matters.
Yeah.
Right.
We're letting the world influence us instead of us influence the world. Now, I don't think he actually gets to that conclusion.
No,
because,
he doesn't.
as you get toward the end of the article, we keep saying, well, what's his answer here? And really, it doesn't seem like he really knows.
He doesn't have one necessarily.
And that's where Answers in Genesis steps in. We're pointing out, hey, here's the problem in our culture, and here's how to solve it. When it comes to, say, evolution, millions of years. Whenever people say, well, let's reject God and accept what the world's saying, oh, no. We got to get back to the Bible. Trust God over all these other issues.
We see a lot of church denominations that are trying to increase their numbers, increase their reach by being, LGBT friendly, as they call it, or things like that. And it's that their churches aren't growing. Those denominations are getting smaller and smaller and smaller.
Because they become just like the world.
Yeah, what's the difference?
There's no
Why
distinction.
would you even go there? They don't have the truth of God's word.
And that's a big warning to us. A lot of times Christians can say, wow, there's a problem out here in our churches, but if they're not going to solve the right problem, they're not going to get to a solution. Let me kind of lay this out for you. One of the things it says in the article here says, while some do still hold to Christian values, even people of faith engage and attend church very differently than in previous generations. And there's a lot of truth to that. If you look at the church, by and large, going back the last couple of thousand years, the church today is significantly different than that, entity. Now, we've been heavily influenced by the world. Let me give you an example. Yesterday was Whit Sunday. That's also called Pentecost. Back in the older days of the church, that used to be a 3 to 7 day festival with a big meal. Boy, people used to have a heyday. Pentecost, it's 49 days after Easter Sunday, so it's exactly 7 weeks afterwards. They oftentimes did a communication service. Sometimes people were fasting leading up to it. It was a really big deal. How many churches yesterday actually even mentioned Pentecost, let alone had a festival or engaged Christians and talked about that and kind of brought back up the resurrection, the ascension of Jesus? Hardly anyone. But here's what I did see. I saw a lot of churches, because I talked to a lot of people yesterday about this, a lot of churches would have a graduation service. Hey, our kids graduated from high school, they're going on to a state school or whatever it might be. Essentially, they've been taught a lot of this pagan stuff over the years. Congratulations, continue in your pagan studies, and great for you guys. And see, notice how there's been a shift over. Really what's happened is a lot of churches have let the world in, and they're saying, let's celebrate what the world's doing, not what Christians have done.
Yeah.
And so the big picture to learn from all this is, when we're looking at the churches, yes, something needs to be done, but don't go the wrong direction.
Yes,
Right.
yeah.
And
Don't
that's
try to
where
be
this book is really important
Right.
here. The Great Turning Point from Dr. Terry Mortensen. He is a historian, particularly of geology. And what he really focused on was a significant change that happened in the late early 1800s. The church was met with a similar issue. What are we going to do with the millions of years evolutionary ideas when at that time, late early 1800s, people started giving up the Bible to accept the secular world's ideas about geology? Basically, it said there was no global flood. Let's just accept millions of years and long ages. And sadly, here's what a lot of churches did. Oh, well, we need to go along with the world. Let's just take the millions of years and evolutionary ideas and let's just add it to Scripture.
Right.
And all of a sudden, churches just started to get decimated. Christian colleges like Oxford, Yale, Harvard became secular institutions. We saw this left and right. Next thing you know, the church is on a massive decline. And the Great Turning Point, I think, outlines where that really started to happen. Now we're in the same sort of situation today. Are we going to get back to the authority of Scripture, or are we going to let the world continue to influence us?
Amen. No.
Tell you're a little bit passionate about
that
that
was a long
issue.
one.
We knew he was going to go on a tangent here. Not a tangent, but it's good because we need to realize that what we need to have. I agree. We need to have relevancy. I think that, and that's why people are walking away because they don't see that the church is different than the world. So why attend church, right? And so that's what we need to bring it.
Yeah,
back
if
to.
God's just kind of something you add on top of all the beliefs you already have, then what's the
that gonna
point?
do?
Yeah, you're not letting your thinking be shaped by God's word. Okay, so the next one, speaking of trying to make things more relevant, I guess, this next one, Pope Francis made this big change to Lord's Prayer. So recently, Pope Francis officially approved a change to the Lord's Prayer in the Latin version of that.
Right, and I think the French version, they're approving wording as well.
Okay, that the known as Our Father in Catholicism, and he's claiming that this is closer to the original intent of the prayer. So they've changed it from.
So he's not changing the Greek; he's trying to change the translation.
Yeah. So they've changed it from "Lead us not into temptation" to "Do not let us fall into temptation," as Matthew 6:13, based on
Now
that.
that's not
passage.
exactly true to the Greek, though. I mean,
Right.
that's one of the issues.
and
You've got to
even-
be careful of that.
Even
Yeah,
Spurgeon
absolutely.
had talked a little bit about this particular part years ago, back in 1863, and he said that word temptation actually has two meanings, both the temptation toward sin and the facing of trials and tribulations. So God does allow us to enter trials and tribulations. I mean, we live in a fallen world, and but he's never, and in those trials and tribulations, we may face temptations. There may be things that we're tempted to do,
Right.
but it's not God that's actually doing the tempting. I agree, but
James
that's not what that
1:13,
verse
yeah.
is
That's right.
implying, or by saying that, it's not implying that. And he even concluded, Spurgeon said, it is most in line, lead us not in temptation is most in line with the original Greek and what it meant.
See, I think the very next line of the Lord's Prayer actually clarifies all this. The very next line says, "But deliver us from the evil one."
Lead us not
Right.
into temptation, but deliver us from the evil
That's
one.
right. Now, really what this does is this comes down to an issue of who's doing the leading. Okay?
Right.
That's what's happening. I mean, you can look at the parallel in Luke 11:4, lead us not into temptation. It's the same sort of thing there. So who's the one leading? God is.
Right.
And that's because God is the sovereign God.
Yep.
Now, what they're wanting to do is kind of make the change in here that almost makes it seem like Satan is the one now doing the leading because of the temptation. But if you go back and consider, who was it that led Jesus into the wilderness to be tempted by Satan? The Spirit. Okay, here it is, Matthew 4:1. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil.
Right.
So there's nothing wrong with
Yeah.
God leading us places. That's not the
Right.
problem. The key is the temptation. It's Satan that does the temptation.
Yeah,
It's
James
the evil
1:13,
one.
God
Yes.
does not tempt anyone.
Right. And so I think the change that they're trying to make here is really an attack on the sovereignty of God.
Yeah, I think that's a good way of looking at that, and we need to be careful of that, because the people who studied the original languages tried to be very, very careful when they translate it into English and what it should say to stay true to what the original language was. And so, but I was like, 1 Corinthians 10:13, it says, "No temptation has overtaken you that is not common to man," right? God is faithful. So we know that any temptation that the devil does lead us into, right? That any trial or tribulation that God leads us into, and then we have these temptations, that God can help us, right? He always makes a
Absolutely.
way of escape because he's sovereign, right? He's in control of all of it. And we have to remember that when we're faced with temptation.
Yeah.
You guys are making tons of comments like I
I know,
cannot
I'm
keep
seeing
up.
it too. I can't keep up with all
Where are
of
the
it.
people
It's
making
like,
tons of comments on the
wow.
Answers in Genesis page? Come on,
Yeah.
guys.
Well, they're all following.
There's a few, but
they
not
know
as
George
many.
and I are following.
So, yeah, I appreciate all of the comments. I just can't keep up with all of the comments. So, anyways, but we do appreciate you watching, and we
Yeah,
are
we're
out of time for today. There's only one article we didn't get to.
We
so
almost got 'em all done.
Avery and Roger will be back on Thursday to discuss that, and so we'll see you then.
All right, God bless you guys.